The dust had barely settled on the wagon tracks when Gabrielle Bradford's brother shoved the last of her belongings into her arms and told her she was dead to the family. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Oro Blanco, Arizona, in the summer of 1878, and the heat seemed to press against her skin like a physical weight as she stood alone on the main street, clutching a worn carpet bag and a bundle of dresses tied with twine. Thomas Bradford, her only living relative since their parents had died of typhoid 3 years prior, turned his back on her without another word and walked into the general store he had inherited, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled in its frame. Gabrielle felt the eyes of the townspeople on her like brands. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house looked away quickly when their gazes met. The banker's wife whispered something to her companion behind a gloved hand. Even young Timothy Walsh, who had always been kind to her, suddenly found great interest in the dirt at his feet. She understood their judgment. In a town like Oro Blanco, reputation was everything, and hers was ruined. It had happened 3 weeks ago at the Henderson Ranch, where she worked as a seamstress and occasional cook. Jack Henderson, the eldest son, had cornered her in the storage room while she was fetching flour. She had fought him, screaming and clawing, but he was stronger. When Mrs. Henderson found them, Jack's shirt was torn from Gabrielle's desperate attempts to push him away, and Gabrielle's dress was ripped at the shoulder. Jack had immediately claimed that she had tried to seduce him, that she had lured him there with promises. His mother believed him without question. Within hours, the story had spread through Oro Blanco like wildfire, growing more scandalous with each telling. Thomas had been furious when he heard the gossip. He refused to listen to her explanation, refused to believe that his sister could be the victim rather than the villain. The Bradford name meant something in this town, he shouted at her. Their father had been a respected man, and Thomas would not let her destroy that legacy with her wanton behavior. When she tried to explain what really happened, he struck her across the face and told her to stop lying. The next morning, he told her to pack her things. Now she stood in the street with nowhere to go and less than $5 to her name. The bank would not hire a woman with a tarnished reputation. The boarding house would not take her in. Even the saloon girls looked at her with disdain, as if she had somehow violated some code they understood, and she did not. Gabrielle pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders despite the heat and started walking toward the edge of town. Her vision blurring with unshed tears, she refused to let fall where anyone could see. She had made it past the last building, a shabby stable that smelled of hay and horses, when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Gabrielle did not turn around. She kept walking, her worn boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The rider came alongside her and slowed to match her pace. "You look like you are carrying the weight of the whole territory on those shoulders," a man's voice said. It was deep and calm, with a slight roughness to it like sand over stone. Gabrielle glanced up briefly. The rider was a cowboy, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the edges beneath his hat. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, and they looked at her with something that was not judgment. She looked away quickly. "I am fine," she said, her voice tight. "You do not look fine," the cowboy said. "You look like someone just set your world on fire." "Then I suppose you should keep riding," Gabrielle replied. "I have nothing that anyone wants." The cowboy was quiet for a moment, and she thought he might actually leave. Instead, he dismounted, leading his horse on foot beside her. "I am Quincy Kellerman," he said. "I work at the Double K Ranch about 10 miles north of here." "I did not ask," Gabrielle said, but her voice lacked real heat. She was too tired, too heartbroken to maintain proper anger. "No, you did not," Quincy agreed. "But I'm telling you anyway because I figure if we are going to walk together, we should at least know each other's names." "We are not walking together. You are following me?" "Well, that is true enough," Quincy said, and she could hear the hint of amusement in his voice. "Well, what is your name?" Gabrielle stopped walking and turned to face him fully for the first time. He was taller than she had realized, probably over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a man who spent his days working hard under the sun. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw and a small scar above his left eyebrow. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were kind, and there was something in them that made her want to trust him, which was absurd given what had just happened to her. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Because you are walking into the desert with nothing but a bag and some dresses," Quincy said simply. "And because I saw what happened back there. Your brother throwing you out, I mean. The whole town talking." Gabrielle felt her cheeks burn with shame. "Then you know why you should not be talking to me." "I know what people are saying," Quincy corrected. "That does not mean I believe it." The words hit her like cool water on a scorching day. Gabrielle felt something crack inside her chest, and suddenly the tears she had been holding back spilled over. She turned away quickly, mortified, but Quincy had already seen. "Hey now," he said softly. He pulled a bandana from his pocket and held it out to her. "Here." Gabrielle took it with shaking hands and pressed it to her face. The fabric smelled like leather and sage. She tried to compose herself, drawing in deep breaths of the hot desert air. When she finally lowered the bandana, Quincy was watching her with concern but no pity, which she appreciated more than he could know. "My name is Gabrielle Bradford," she said quietly, "and they cast me out because they say I shamed the family." "Did you?" Quincy asked, and there was no accusation in the question, only genuine curiosity. "No," Gabrielle said, and her voice was stronger now. "Jack Henderson attacked me. I fought him off. His mother found us and he lied. He said I tried to seduce him. Everyone believed him because he is a man and his family has money, and I am just a seamstress." Quincy nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "I have met Jack Henderson," he said. "He came to the ranch once looking to buy horses. My boss threw him out for being disrespectful to one of the kitchen girls. I believe you." Those 3 words, so simple and so complete, nearly undid her again. Gabrielle had not realized how desperately she needed someone to believe her until this moment. She looked at Quincy Kellerman, this stranger who had no reason to care about her troubles, and felt something shift in her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "Shame is not in being hurt," Quincy said, his eyes meeting hers steadily. "Shame is in hurting others and feeling nothing. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Miss Bradford." Gabrielle wiped her eyes one more time and handed the bandana back to him. "Even so, I have nowhere to go. No one in Oro Blanco will hire me now. My brother has made it clear I'm not welcome in his home." Quincy was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking. Then he said, "The Double K is looking for a cook. Our last one quit 2 weeks ago to get married and move to Tucson. The work is hard and the pay is not much, but there is a cabin that comes with the job. It is small, but it is clean and private. The ranch hands are decent men. My boss, Samuel Kershaw, he is a fair man. He does not care about gossip from town." Gabrielle stared at him. "You would do that for me? You do not even know me." "I know enough," Quincy said. "I know you are in trouble and you need help. I know you did not deserve what happened to you. That is enough." He paused, then added, "Besides, we are all desperate for a decent meal. The hands have been taking turns cooking, and I am pretty sure Chuck nearly poisoned us all last week with his attempt at beans." Despite everything, Gabrielle felt a small smile tug at her lips. "I can cook," she said. "My mother taught me before she passed." "Then come to the ranch," Quincy said. "Give it a try. If you do not like it, you can leave any time. But at least you will have a roof over your head and some money in your pocket while you figure out your next step." It was a risk. Gabrielle knew that. She would be isolated on a ranch with men she did not know, far from town. But what choice did she have? She could not stay in Oro Blanco, and she had no money to travel anywhere else. At least at the Double K, she would have shelter and work. And there was something about Quincy Kellerman that made her feel safe, which was remarkable considering her recent experience. "All right," she said finally, "I will come." Quincy's face broke into a smile, and Gabrielle noticed that he had a dimple in his left cheek. "Good," he said. "My horse can carry both of us, plus your things. It is about a 2-hour ride." He helped her mount first, then swung up behind her with easy grace. Gabrielle was acutely aware of his presence, his chest against her back, his arms reaching around her to hold the reins. It should have frightened her after what Jack Henderson had done, but it did not. Quincy held himself carefully, making sure not to press too close, and his touch was respectful. They rode out of Oro Blanco as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Gabrielle did not look back at the town. There was nothing there for her anymore. Instead, she focused on the landscape ahead, the rolling desert dotted with sagebrush and cacti, the distant mountains purple in the fading light. The air began to cool as evening approached, and she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "Tell me about the ranch," she said after a while. "The Double K has been around for about 15 years, Quincy said. Samuel Kershaw started it with his brother Kenneth, but Kenneth died 5 years back in a riding accident. Samuel has run it alone since then with the help of his foreman, Mike Peterson. We run about 500 head of cattle and break horses on the side. There are 8 hands including me, plus Mike and Samuel. That will make 11 with you for cooking duties." "That is a lot of meals," Gabrielle said, but she was not daunted. She had cooked for large groups before at church gatherings. "The kitchen is well stocked," Quincy assured her, "and the hands are not particular. They will be grateful for anything that does not taste like boot leather." "How long have you worked there?" Gabrielle asked. 3 years, Quincy said. "I came from Texas originally. My father died when I was young, and my mother remarried a man who did not much care for me. When I was 18, I decided to head west and make my own way. I worked at a few different spreads before landing at the Double K. It is a good place. Samuel is tough but fair, and he pays on time. The work is honest." Gabrielle appreciated his frankness. "What do you do there?" "Whatever needs doing," Quincy said. "Mostly I work with the horses. I am pretty good at breaking them, and I like the work. There is something satisfying about taking an animal that is wild and scared and helping it understand that not all humans mean harm. Earning their trust, you know." Gabrielle did know. She thought about how Quincy had approached her, not pushing, not demanding, just offering help and letting her make her own choice. "You're good at that," she said quietly. She felt him shift slightly behind her. "At what?" "Earning trust," Gabrielle said. They rode in comfortable silence for a while after that. The sun sank lower, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The temperature dropped noticeably, and Gabrielle shivered. Quincy noticed immediately and pulled a rolled blanket from behind the saddle, draping it over her shoulders without comment. The gesture was so naturally kind that Gabrielle felt tears prick her eyes again, but she blinked them away. As they rode, Quincy pointed out landmarks: the twisted juniper tree that marked the halfway point, the rocky outcropping where he had once seen a mountain lion, the dry creek bed that flooded during the summer monsoons. His voice was soothing, and Gabrielle found herself relaxing despite the uncertainty of her situation. "There," Quincy said eventually, pointing ahead. "That is the Double K." Gabrielle looked and saw lights in the distance, warm and welcoming against the gathering darkness. As they drew closer, she could make out the shapes of buildings: a large main house, a long bunkhouse, several barns and corrals, and a few smaller structures. Smoke rose from a chimney, carrying the scent of wood fire and something cooking, though not well if the slightly burnt smell was any indication. They rode into the yard, and several men emerged from the bunkhouse, clearly curious about the stranger. Quincy dismounted first, then reached up to help Gabrielle down. Her legs were stiff from the long ride, and she stumbled slightly. Quincy steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Wait here," he said quietly. "I will go get Samuel." Gabrielle stood in the yard, very aware of the curious stares from the ranch hands. They were a rough-looking bunch, weathered and lean, with the hard eyes of men who worked from dawn to dusk in all weather. She lifted her chin and met their gazes squarely, refusing to show fear or shame. Quincy returned a few minutes later with an older man who had to be Samuel Kershaw. He was probably in his 50s, with iron-gray hair and a lined face that spoke of years spent outdoors. His eyes were sharp and assessing as they swept over Gabrielle, but not unkind. "This is Miss Gabrielle Bradford," Quincy said. "She is looking for work as a cook. I told her we needed one." Samuel studied her for a long moment. "That is true enough," he said finally. "Our meals have been poor lately. Can you cook, Miss Bradford?" "Yes, sir," Gabrielle said firmly. "I can cook, and I can cook well. My mother ran a boarding house before she died, and I learned from her. I can make just about anything if you have the ingredients." "We have ingredients," Samuel said. "What we do not have is someone who knows what to do with them. The job pays $30 a month plus room and board. You will cook 3 meals a day for the men, keep the kitchen clean, and manage the food supplies. I order staples from town once a month, and you can give me a list of what you need. The work starts before dawn and does not end until after supper. It is hard, but the men will treat you with respect or answer to me. Do you want the job?" $30 a month was more than Gabrielle had made as a seamstress. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to eventually save for a new start somewhere else if she chose. "Yes, sir," she said. "I want the job." Samuel nodded. "The cabin is behind the kitchen. Quincy, show her where everything is and help her get settled. Tomorrow you start, Miss Bradford. Breakfast is at 5 in the morning." "I will be ready," Gabrielle said. Samuel turned to the assembled ranch hands. "This is Miss Bradford. She is the new cook. You will treat her with respect and courtesy at all times. Anyone who does not will be looking for work elsewhere. Understood?" There was a chorus of "Yes, boss" from the men. Samuel nodded once and headed back to the main house. Quincy picked up Gabrielle's bag and the bundle of dresses. "Come on," he said. "I will show you the cabin." They walked past the main house and around behind a long, low building that had to be the kitchen. Behind it stood a small cabin, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, with a single window and a wooden door. Quincy opened the door and gestured for Gabrielle to enter first. The interior was sparse but clean. There was a narrow bed with a worn quilt, a small table with one chair, a trunk for storage, and a washstand with a pitcher and basin. A lantern hung from a hook on the wall. It was not much, but it was more than Gabrielle had expected, and it was hers. "The privy is out back," Quincy said, setting her things on the floor. "There is a well between here and the bunkhouse, and you can heat water for washing in the kitchen. If you need anything, the bunkhouse is the long building to the east. I am in the 3rd bunk on the left side if you need to find me specifically." Gabrielle turned to him, overwhelmed by everything that had happened in one day. This morning she had been cast out with nothing. Now she had a job, a place to live, and someone who believed her. "Thank you, Quincy," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "I do not know how to repay you for this." "You do not need to repay me," Quincy said gently. "Just take care of yourself, and know that you did nothing wrong. That is all I ask." He tipped his hat to her and left, closing the door softly behind him. Gabrielle stood in the small cabin and finally allowed herself to fully feel everything she had been holding inside. She sank down on the bed and cried, but this time the tears were not just from pain and loss. They were also from relief and hope, 2 things she had thought were lost to her forever. The next morning, Gabrielle woke before dawn to the sound of a rooster crowing somewhere in the yard. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses and tied her long brown hair back in a practical bun. The air was cool, almost cold, and she wrapped her shawl around herself as she made her way to the kitchen. The kitchen was larger than she expected, with a big iron stove, a long preparation table, shelves lined with supplies, and a massive fireplace that could accommodate a spit for roasting. Hooks hung from the ceiling beams, and she could see salt pork and herbs hanging to dry. Someone had left a fire banked in the stove, so it did not take long to get it going properly. Gabrielle assessed the supplies and found flour, salt, lard, eggs from the henhouse outside, bacon, dried beans, coffee, sugar, and various other staples. It was more than enough to work with. She decided to start with something simple but satisfying: biscuits, bacon, eggs, and gravy. She also put on a large pot of coffee, making it strong the way working men preferred. By the time the sky began to lighten, the kitchen was filled with delicious smells. Gabrielle had set the long table in the adjoining dining area with tin plates and cups, and she had cooked enough food to feed an army. At precisely 5 o'clock, the ranch hands began to arrive. They entered quietly, almost hesitantly, their eyes widening at the spread before them. Quincy was among them, and when his eyes met Gabrielle's, he smiled. Samuel came in last with a tall, broad-shouldered man who had to be Mike Peterson, the foreman. "Sit down and eat while it is hot," Gabrielle said, trying to sound confident despite her nerves. The men did not need to be told twice. They filled their plates and dug in, and within moments the room was filled with sounds of appreciation. Gabrielle busied herself pouring coffee and bringing out more biscuits from the oven, watching anxiously for reactions. "Miss Bradford," Samuel said after a few bites, "this is the best meal I have had in months." "Years," one of the other hands corrected around a mouthful of biscuit. The others laughed and nodded in agreement. Gabrielle felt warmth spread through her chest. This was what she was good at, what she loved doing. Feeding people, taking care of them through the simple act of preparing good food. For the first time since the incident with Jack Henderson, she felt like herself again. After breakfast, the men headed out to start their day's work. Quincy lingered behind as the others left. "That was incredible," he said. "I think you may have just become the most popular person on this ranch." Gabrielle laughed, a real laugh that surprised her. It was just breakfast. "It was more than that," Quincy said seriously. "It was the first time in weeks that the men did not dread sitting down to eat. You have a gift, Gabrielle." The way he said her name, gently and with warmth, made her heart skip a beat. She busied herself clearing plates to hide her reaction. "You should get to work," she said. "Thank you again for everything." "You are welcome," Quincy said. He hesitated, then added, "If you need anything at all, you come find me, all right?" Gabrielle nodded, not trusting her voice. Quincy gave her one more smile and headed out, leaving her alone with the breakfast dishes and a strange fluttering feeling in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. The day settled into a routine. Gabrielle rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, served the meal at 5, cleaned up and prepared lunch for noon, served dinner at 6 in the evening, and then cleaned up again before collapsing into bed exhausted but satisfied. The work was hard, but it was honest, and the men appreciated her efforts. They began to leave her little gifts: wildflowers in a tin cup, a perfectly smooth stone, a carved wooden spoon, small tokens of appreciation that touched her more than they probably realized. Quincy was always among the first to arrive for meals and the last to leave. He would linger to help her carry water or bring in firewood for the stove, and they would talk while he worked. She learned that he was 26 years old, 2 years older than she was. He had a younger sister in Texas who he wrote to regularly. He loved horses and had a gift for understanding them. His favorite color was the deep blue of the sky just after sunset. He had never been in love, though he had courted a girl once back in Texas before her father decided Quincy was not good enough for her. "That must have hurt," Gabrielle said one evening as they stood outside the kitchen, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. Quincy shrugged. "It did at the time, but looking back, I think it was for the best. She was not really interested in me, just the idea of me. She wanted someone to rescue her from a life she found boring. I wanted a partner, someone to build a life with. We would have made each other miserable." "What do you want now?" Gabrielle asked. Quincy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The same thing I wanted then. Someone to share my life with. Someone who sees me for who I really am and likes what she sees. Someone kind and strong and brave." He looked at her as he said it, and Gabrielle felt heat rise in her cheeks. She looked away, her heart pounding. "That is a good thing to want," she said softly. "What about you?" Quincy asked. "What do you want, Gabrielle?" No one had asked her that in a long time. Gabrielle thought about it carefully. "I want to feel safe," she said finally. "I want to be somewhere I belong, with people who value me. I want to wake up in the morning without fear. I want to be able to trust again." "You can trust me," Quincy said quietly. "I hope you know that." Gabrielle turned to look at him. In the fading light, his eyes looked almost silver. "I do know that," she said, and realized it was true. Somehow, over the past 3 weeks, Quincy had become someone she trusted completely. The realization was both comforting and terrifying. That night, as Gabrielle lay in her narrow bed, she thought about Quincy Kellerman and the way her heart felt lighter when he was near. She thought about how he made her laugh, how he listened when she talked, how his presence made her feel protected without making her feel weak. She thought about the incident with Jack Henderson and how it had left her feeling broken and ashamed, and how Quincy's words that first day had begun to heal something inside her. Shame is not in being hurt. She repeated those words to herself like a prayer. Shame is not in being hurt. Summer deepened into the scorching heat of August. The work on the ranch intensified as the cattle needed to be moved to higher pastures, and the men were often gone from dawn until well after dark. Gabrielle adapted her schedule, keeping food warm for the late arrivals and making sure there was always coffee available. She expanded her repertoire, baking pies and cakes for special occasions, making stews that could simmer all day, experimenting with different recipes she remembered from her mother. One particularly hot afternoon, Gabrielle was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when she heard a commotion outside. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to the door. Several of the ranch hands were gathered around something in the yard. She could hear Quincy's voice, low and soothing. Curious, Gabrielle stepped outside. The men parted to let her through, and she saw Quincy kneeling beside a horse that was lying on its side, breathing hard. The animal was covered in sweat and trembling. "What happened?" Gabrielle asked. "Heat exhaustion," Quincy said without looking up. His hands moved gently over the horse's body, checking for injuries. Chuck was pushing him too hard in this heat without enough water breaks. The horse collapsed. Chuck, a stocky man with a red face, looked defensive. "I did not mean to hurt him. I was just trying to get the work done." "Well, you nearly killed him," Quincy said, and there was anger in his voice that Gabrielle had never heard before. "Horses are not machines, Chuck. They need care and attention, same as people." Gabrielle hurried back to the kitchen and returned with a bucket of cool water and some clean rags. She knelt beside Quincy and began to carefully wet the horse's neck and chest, helping to cool him down. Quincy glanced at her and nodded his approval. They worked together in silence for nearly an hour, cooling the horse and coaxing him to drink small amounts of water. Finally, the animal's breathing steadied, and he was able to stand with help. Quincy led him slowly to the barn, and Gabrielle followed. "Will he be all right?" she asked as Quincy settled the horse into a stall with fresh hay and more water. "I think so," Quincy said. He looked exhausted and upset, but it was close. Too close. "You saved him," Gabrielle said gently. "You helped," Quincy said. "You knew exactly what to do without me having to tell you." "My father kept horses before he died," Gabrielle explained. "I used to help him care for them. I liked being around them." Quincy looked at her with something that might have been admiration. "You never stop surprising me," he said. They were standing close together in the dim barn, and Gabrielle was suddenly very aware of Quincy's presence. He had removed his hat, and his hair was damp with sweat. There was a smudge of dirt on his cheek. Without thinking, she reached up and brushed it away with her thumb. Quincy went very still. His eyes locked on hers, and Gabrielle saw something in them that made her breath catch. Then slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was nothing like the violent assault from Jack Henderson. This was gentle and sweet, a question rather than a demand. Gabrielle's eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into the kiss, her hands coming up to rest on Quincy's chest. She could feel his heart pounding under her palms, as fast as her own. When they finally pulled apart, Gabrielle was breathless. Quincy rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted quietly. "I am glad you did," Gabrielle whispered. They stood like that for a long moment, just breathing together in the quiet barn. Then Quincy pulled back slightly and cupped her face in his hands. "Gabrielle, I need you to know something. What I feel for you, it is not just attraction or loneliness. You are the strongest, bravest, most amazing woman I have ever met. When I see you, I see someone who survived something terrible and came out the other side still kind, still caring. I see someone who knows how to give and receive help with equal grace. I see the woman I want to spend my life with, if you will have me. Gabrielle felt tears prick her eyes. Quincy, I do not know if I am ready for that. What happened with Jack? It left scars. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, reliving it. I still flinch when someone moves too quickly near me. I am not whole. You are whole, Quincy said firmly. You are not broken just because you were hurt, and I am not asking you to be ready right now. I am just telling you how I feel so you know. We can take this as slow as you need. I am not going anywhere. Gabrielle looked into his eyes and saw only honesty and patience. She thought about how carefully he had courted her over the past weeks, never pushing, never demanding, always respecting her boundaries. She thought about how safe she felt with him, how happy. She thought about the future she had believed was lost to her and realized that maybe, just maybe, it was still possible. I care for you too, she said, very much. You make me feel like I can breathe again. Quincy smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. He kissed her again, soft and lingering, and Gabrielle felt something inside her that had been frozen since that terrible day began to thaw. Over the following weeks, Gabrielle and Quincy grew closer. They were discreet, not wanting to fuel gossip among the ranch hands, but they spent every free moment together. Quincy taught her to ride properly, not just sitting on a horse, but really riding, feeling the animal's movements, and working with them. Gabrielle introduced him to her favorite books, reading aloud to him in the evenings by lamplight. They talked about everything. Their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Quincy told her about watching his father die from a farming accident when he was 12, about his mother's struggles to keep the family together, about the stepfather who saw him as a burden rather than a son. Gabrielle told him about her parents' deaths, about Thomas's growing coldness after he inherited the store, about her dreams of someday having a home of her own filled with love and laughter. You will have that, Quincy promised her one night as they sat on the steps of her cabin watching the stars. I will make sure you have that. In September, a traveling preacher came through the area and Samuel Kershaw invited him to hold services at the ranch for anyone who wanted to attend. Most of the hands showed up, scrubbed clean and wearing their best shirts. Gabrielle wore her nicest dress, a blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes, and Quincy could not stop looking at her. After the service, Quincy asked Gabrielle to walk with him. They strolled away from the main buildings toward a small rise that overlooked the valley. The autumn air was cool and pleasant, the brutal summer heat finally broken. Gabrielle, Quincy said when they reached the top of the rise, I have something to ask you. Gabrielle's heart began to pound. She turned to face him and found him reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small ring, simple silver with a tiny turquoise stone. This was my grandmother's, Quincy said. My mother sent it to me in a letter last month. She said my grandmother would want me to give it to a woman I truly loved. He took a deep breath. Gabrielle Bradford, will you marry me? Gabrielle looked at the ring, at Quincy's hopeful face, and felt joy surge through her so strongly it almost hurt. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, Quincy, I will marry you. Quincy let out a whoop of happiness and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while she laughed. When he set her down, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They were married by the same traveling preacher 3 days later before he moved on to the next town. Samuel Kershaw gave Gabrielle away, and Mike Peterson stood up as Quincy's best man. All the ranch hands attended, and Gabrielle cooked a feast for the celebration afterward. She had never been happier. That night, in the small cabin that was now theirs, Quincy was infinitely patient and gentle with Gabrielle. He understood her fears, her hesitations, and he moved slowly, always checking to make sure she was comfortable. When she tensed, remembering Jack Henderson's violence, Quincy would stop and hold her, murmuring reassurances until she relaxed again. Finally, Gabrielle was able to let go of the fear and trust completely. What followed was nothing like the attack she had survived. It was tender and loving, a true joining of two people who cared deeply for each other. Afterward, lying in Quincy's arms in the narrow bed, Gabrielle felt something she had not felt since before her parents died: complete and utter peace. She traced the scar above Quincy's eyebrow with one finger. "How did you get this?" she asked. "Horse kicked me when I was learning to break them," Quincy said. "I was too arrogant, thought I knew better than the experienced hands. The horse taught me some humility." Gabrielle laughed softly. "It gives you character." "That is a polite way of saying it makes me look like I have been through a fight," Quincy teased. "No," Gabrielle said seriously. "It makes you look like someone who has lived and learned and survived, like me." Quincy tightened his arms around her. "We are both survivors," he agreed. "And we are going to have a wonderful life together, Gabrielle. I promise you that." As autumn turned to winter, life at the Double K continued in its rhythms. Gabrielle had moved her few possessions into the bunkhouse room that Samuel cleared for her and Quincy, a slightly larger space that gave them more privacy. She continued to cook for the ranch hands, and Quincy continued his work with the horses. But now they were building a life together, saving their money and making plans. In December, a letter arrived from Gabrielle's brother Thomas. Samuel brought it to her with a frown. "A rider brought this from town," he said. "Says it is from your brother." Gabrielle took the letter with trembling hands. She had not heard from Thomas since the day he cast her out nearly 6 months ago. She sat down at the kitchen table to read it, and Quincy, who had come in for coffee, sat beside her and took her free hand in his. The letter was brief and cold. Thomas wrote that he had heard she was working at the Double K Ranch and that people in town were saying she had married one of the cowboys. He wanted her to know that this did not change anything. As far as he was concerned, she was still dead to him and to the Bradford name. She was not welcome in Oro Blanco, and she was not to contact him again. Gabrielle read the letter twice, then carefully folded it and set it on the table. She expected to feel hurt or angry, but instead she felt nothing but a strange sense of freedom. "Are you all right?" Quincy asked quietly. "I am more than all right," Gabrielle said. "I realize now that I do not need Thomas's approval or forgiveness. I did nothing wrong. Jack Henderson hurt me, and instead of supporting me, Thomas chose to believe a lie because it was easier than standing up for his sister. That is his shame, not mine." Quincy squeezed her hand. "I am proud of you," he said. Gabrielle looked at her husband, at his kind eyes and his strong, gentle hands, and felt a wave of love so powerful it took her breath away. "I have something to tell you," she said. "What is that?" "I am with child," Gabrielle said, watching his face. "I am almost certain. I have missed my monthly courses twice now, and I have been feeling ill in the mornings." Quincy stared at her for a moment, and then his face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. "A baby," he whispered. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Gabrielle asked, even though she could feel the answer in the way he held her. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Quincy said. "I am thrilled. I am terrified. I am grateful. Gabrielle, you have given me everything I ever wanted. A wife I love, a child on the way, a purpose to my life. I could not ask for more." That winter was the happiest of Gabrielle's life. As her pregnancy progressed, Quincy became even more attentive and protective. He insisted on carrying heavy pots for her, on making sure she rested between meals, on bringing her little treats from town when he went for supplies. The ranch hands were equally supportive, offering congratulations and their own brand of rough but sincere care. Samuel Kershaw called them into his office one cold January afternoon. "I have a proposition for you both," he said. "I am getting older, and I have been thinking about the future of this ranch. I have no children of my own to leave it to. You two have become like family to me this past year. I would like to offer you a partnership." Gabrielle and Quincy exchanged surprised looks. "What kind of partnership?" Quincy asked. "I will deed you both a portion of the ranch," Samuel said. 20% of the land and the cattle. In exchange, you will continue to work here and help me manage the place. When I die, the rest will be split between you and Mike Peterson, who I have already made a similar offer to. That way, the Double K will stay in the hands of people who care about it." "Samuel, that is incredibly generous," Gabrielle said, her eyes filling with tears. "But why would you do this for us?" "Because you are good people," Samuel said simply. "Because Quincy is the best horseman I have ever had. And Gabrielle, you have made this place feel like a home instead of just a workplace. Because I can see that you two will build something lasting here. You have already survived so much. You deserve a chance to thrive." Quincy looked at Gabrielle and she nodded. "We accept," Quincy said, "and thank you, Samuel. You have given us more than we ever could have hoped for." They shook on it. And just like that, Gabrielle and Quincy Kellerman became partial owners of the Double K Ranch. It was a new beginning, a future that was theirs to shape. In late April of 1879, Gabrielle went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, lasting nearly 20 hours. Quincy stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with cool cloths. When the baby finally arrived, a squalling, red-faced boy, Quincy wept openly. "A son," he said wonderingly, cradling the tiny infant in his large, work-roughened hands. "We have a son, Gabriel." They named him Samuel Thomas Kellerman, after Samuel Kershaw, who had given them so much, and Thomas Bradford, because despite everything, he was still Gabrielle's brother and she wanted to honor that connection, even if Thomas himself had severed it. The baby had Quincy's dark hair and Gabrielle's blue eyes, and he was perfect. Samuel Kershaw was deeply moved when they told him the baby's name. "I am honored," he said gruffly, wiping suspiciously bright eyes. "Truly honored." The ranch hands doted on little Samuel, taking turns carving him toys and competing to make him smile. Gabrielle watched her son grow surrounded by love and protection, and she marveled at how different his life would be from her own difficult childhood. When Samuel was 6 months old, Gabrielle and Quincy received an unexpected visitor. Gabrielle was hanging laundry behind the cabin when she heard a horse approaching. She turned to see a woman dismounting, a woman she recognized immediately. "Mrs. Henderson," Gabrielle said, her voice carefully neutral. Martha Henderson looked older than Gabrielle remembered, her face lined with new wrinkles and her eyes shadowed. "Miss Bradford," she said, then corrected herself. "Mrs. Kellerman, I heard you married." "I did," Gabrielle said. She did not invite Mrs. Henderson to sit, did not offer refreshments. She simply waited to hear why the woman had come. Mrs. Henderson twisted her hands together. "I came to apologize," she said finally. "I should have done this months ago, but I was too proud, too stubborn. My son Jack, he left for California 3 months ago. Before he left, he got drunk one night and confessed what he did to you. He admitted that he attacked you, that he lied about it afterward. I have been living with the knowledge of what I did, how I condemned an innocent woman, and I cannot bear it anymore. I am so, so sorry, Mrs. Kellerman. You were right, and I was wrong, and I helped drive you from your home unjustly." Gabrielle stood very still, processing this. A part of her wanted to rage at Mrs. Henderson to tell her that her apology was far too late and could never undo the harm that had been done. But another part of her, the part that had healed over the past year, that had found love and happiness and purpose, simply felt tired of carrying anger. "I accept your apology," Gabrielle said quietly. "Not because it makes everything all right, but because holding on to bitterness serves no purpose. What happened cannot be changed, but I want you to know that despite everything, despite being cast out and shamed, I have found a good life here. I have a husband who loves me, a son who is healthy and happy, and work that I find meaningful. Your son hurt me and you wronged me, but you did not destroy me." Mrs. Henderson was crying now. I told everyone in Oro Blanco the truth, she said. Your brother knows. He knows what really happened. Gabrielle felt something twist in her chest. And what did Thomas say? He was very quiet, Mrs. Henderson said. He did not say much at all. But I saw his face, Mrs. Kellerman. He knows he was wrong. Gabrielle nodded slowly. She did not feel satisfaction or vindication, only a deep sadness for all the time that had been lost, for the family connection that had been severed and might never be repaired. Thank you for telling me, she said, and thank you for coming here. I imagine it was not easy. It was the least I could do, Mrs. Henderson said. I will go now, but I wanted you to know the truth has come out. Your name has been cleared in Oro Blanco. After Mrs. Henderson left, Gabrielle stood in the yard for a long time thinking. Quincy found her there when he came in from working with the horses. He did not ask what was wrong, just wrapped his arms around her from behind and held her. Mrs. Henderson came, Gabrielle said finally. Jack confessed. She told everyone the truth. Thomas knows what really happened. Quincy was quiet for a moment. How do you feel about that? I do not know, Gabrielle admitted. Part of me is glad the truth is finally known. But it does not change anything, does it? Thomas still cast me out. He still chose to believe I was capable of such behavior. Even if he knows the truth now, that does not erase what he did. No, Quincy agreed. It does not. But maybe it will give him the chance to make amends if he chooses to take it. Gabrielle turned in his arms to face him. I do not need him to make amends, she said. I have everything I need right here. You, Samuel, this ranch. I am happy, Quincy, truly happy. Thomas's approval or lack of it does not change that. Quincy kissed her forehead. You are an extraordinary woman, Gabrielle Kellerman, he said. Have I told you that lately? Not since this morning, Gabrielle said with a smile. They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and Gabrielle felt the last piece of the past fall away. She was no longer the frightened, ashamed woman who had been cast out of Oro Blanco. She was someone new, someone stronger. She was a wife, a mother, a cook, a partial owner of a successful ranch. She was loved and valued and respected, and that was more than enough. 2 weeks later, another visitor arrived. Gabrielle was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Samuel came to find her. You have a visitor, he said. Your brother's here. Gabrielle's hands stilled in the bread dough she was kneading. Thomas? The same, Samuel said. He is waiting in the yard. Do you want me to send him away? Gabrielle thought about it. She could send Thomas away and no one would blame her. But she found that she was curious about what he had to say. No, she said. I will speak with him. She washed her hands and removed her apron, then walked outside. Thomas was standing beside a horse, looking uncomfortable and out of place in his town clothes. He looked older than she remembered, his face drawn and tired. When he saw her, he removed his hat. Gabrielle, he said. Thomas, she replied, her voice cool. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Finally, Thomas said, Mrs. Henderson told me what really happened. With her son. She told me the truth. I know, Gabrielle said. She came here 2 weeks ago. I should have believed you, Thomas said, and his voice broke. You are my sister, and I should have believed you. Instead, I cast you out without even listening to your side. I let the gossip and my pride matter more than family. I have been living with that knowledge for weeks now, and I cannot sleep, cannot eat. I had to come and tell you how sorry I am. Gabrielle looked at her brother, at the genuine remorse on his face, and felt her anger soften slightly. But she was not ready to forgive easily. You did more than just not believe me, Thomas. You struck me. You called me a liar and a whore. You threw me out with nothing and told me I was dead to you. You did all of that because it was easier than defending me, easier than questioning what the Henderson family said. You were a coward. Thomas flinched as if she had slapped him. I know, he said hoarsely. I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. Gabrielle, I am not asking you to forgive me right away. I do not deserve that, but I am asking for a chance to make things right. You are my only family. I do not want to lose you forever." Before Gabrielle could respond, Quincy appeared at her side. He looked at Thomas with cool assessment. "You must be the brother," he said. "I am," Thomas said. "Thomas Bradford. And you must be the man who married my sister." "Quincy Kellerman," Quincy said. He did not offer his hand. "I am the man who found your sister when you threw her out, who gave her a job and a home when you would not. I am the man who loves her and will spend the rest of my life making sure she never feels unwanted or ashamed again." Thomas looked at the ground. "Then you are a better man than I am." "Yes," Quincy said bluntly, "I am, but Gabrielle is the one who gets to decide whether you have a place in her life now, not me." Gabrielle looked at Quincy, at the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, and loved him even more. She turned back to Thomas. "I cannot forgive you right away," she said. "What you did hurt too much, but I'm willing to try to rebuild something, if you are truly committed to making amends." Thomas's face lit up with hope. "I am," he said eagerly. "I will do whatever it takes, Gabrielle. I will spend years making this up to you if I have to." "Then start by meeting your nephew," Gabrielle said. "His name is Samuel Thomas Kellerman. I named him partly after you because despite everything, you are still my brother." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "You named your son after me, after what I did." "I named him for the brother I grew up with," Gabrielle said. "The one who used to read to me when I was sick and taught me to skip stones. That is the brother I want back. Can you be that person again?" "I can try," Thomas said. "I swear to you, Gabrielle, I will try." Over the following months, Thomas made good on his promise. He visited the ranch regularly, always bringing gifts for baby Samuel and supplies for Gabrielle's kitchen. He got to know Quincy and earned the other man's grudging respect through his obvious efforts to make amends. He told everyone in Oro Blanco about how well Gabrielle was doing, about her partnership in the Double K Ranch, about what a good mother she was. Slowly, painfully, he began to rebuild the bridge he had burned. It was not easy, and there were moments when old hurts flared up. But Gabrielle found that she was willing to do the work of forgiveness, not for Thomas's sake, but for her own. Holding on to anger and pain was exhausting, and she had better things to do with her energy. She had a family to nurture, a ranch to help manage, and a life to build. By the time Samuel was a year old, Gabrielle was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1880, she gave birth to a daughter they named Rosemarie after Quincy's mother and Gabrielle's mother. Rose had Quincy's gray-green eyes and Gabrielle's brown hair, and she was as beautiful as her name. Samuel Kershaw continued to thrive as the ranch did well financially. The partnership between him, Quincy, Gabrielle, and Mike Peterson proved to be excellent for the business. They expanded their cattle operation and developed a reputation for producing some of the finest horses in the territory. Gabrielle's cooking attracted visiting ranchers and buyers, who often commented that a meal at the Double K was worth the journey alone. In the summer of 1881, Thomas approached Gabrielle with a proposition. "I have been thinking," he said, as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching Samuel and Rose play in the yard under Quincy's watchful eye. "I want to sell the store in Oro Blanco." Gabrielle looked at him in surprise. "But that store is Father's legacy. You have always said it was the most important thing to you." "I was wrong," Thomas said. "People are the most important thing, not businesses. Family is the most important thing. I have spent the last 2 years watching you build a life here, and I have realized that I want to be part of that. I want to move to the ranch if Samuel Kershaw will have me. I can help with the business side of things, managing accounts and supplies. I am good with numbers, always have been, and I want to be close to you and the children." Gabrielle was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I think that would be good. But you need to understand, Thomas, that things are different now. I am not the little sister you can order around. I am a grown woman with my own family and my own life. We are equals now, or we are nothing." "I understand," Thomas said, "and I accept that. Gabrielle, you have become someone amazing. I am proud to call you my sister, and I am grateful that you have given me this second chance." Gabrielle reached over and squeezed his hand. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she said. "Even you." Thomas did sell the store and moved to the Double K. Samuel Kershaw, seeing the value in having someone to manage the financial aspects of the ranch, welcomed him. Thomas proved to be an asset, negotiating better prices for their cattle and horses, managing the books, and handling the correspondence with buyers across the territory. He also proved to be a devoted uncle to Samuel and Rose, spending hours playing with them and teaching them their letters. In 1883, Gabrielle gave birth to twin boys James and Henry, who had their father's dark hair and mischievous dispositions. Quincy was overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure at the prospect of 2 more children. The small cabin had long since been abandoned in favor of a house they built on their portion of the ranch land, a real home with 3 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. It was filled with noise and laughter and the everyday chaos of a growing family. Samuel Kershaw died peacefully in his sleep in 1885, leaving the ranch to Quincy, Gabrielle, and Mike Peterson as he had promised. The funeral was attended by people from all over the territory, a testament to the respect and affection the old rancher had earned. Gabrielle wept for him, this man who had given her a chance when she had nothing, who had become like a father to her. As the years passed, the Double K continued to prosper under the joint management of Quincy, Gabrielle, Mike, and Thomas. They expanded their holdings, built a new barn, and established themselves as one of the premier ranches in Arizona. But more than business success, the ranch became a true home, filled with family and friends and the kind of deep, abiding happiness that comes from building something meaningful together. Gabrielle's children grew strong and healthy. Samuel showed a gift for working with horses like his father. Rose became an excellent cook who often helped her mother. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief but never anything too serious. In 1887, Gabrielle gave birth to her 6th and final child, a girl they named Grace, who had her mother's gentle nature and her father's smile. Thomas eventually married a widow from Tucson who came to the ranch to visit her cousin, one of the ranch hands. They built a small house on the property and had 2 children of their own, a boy and a girl who grew up playing with their cousins. Thomas proved to be a good father, and Gabrielle was glad to see him find happiness. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Quincy took Gabrielle back to the place where he had proposed, the rise overlooking the valley. They stood together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. "Do you remember the first day we met?" Quincy asked, his arm around her waist. "How could I forget?" Gabrielle said. "You found me walking into the desert with nothing but a carpet bag and some dresses." "You were the bravest, most broken, most beautiful thing I had ever seen," Quincy said. "I knew right then that you were special. I just did not know how special, or how much you would come to mean to me." Gabrielle leaned into him. "You saved me that day. You gave me back my life." "No," Quincy said, turning her to face him. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to do it. You are the one who survived what happened to you. You are the one who refused to let shame define you. You are the one who built this incredible life from nothing. I am just lucky enough to be part of it." Gabrielle stood on her toes and kissed him soft and sweet. "We saved each other," she said. "You taught me that shame is not in being hurt. That single truth changed everything for me. It let me heal. It let me love again. It let me become the person I was always meant to be." "And who is that?" Quincy asked with a smile. "Your wife," Gabrielle said. "The mother of your children, a partner in this ranch, a woman who knows her own worth. I am not the frightened girl you found on the road 10 years ago. I am someone who survived and thrived, who turned pain into purpose and shame into strength." "You are extraordinary," Quincy said, echoing his words from so many years ago. "Have I told you that lately?" "Not since this morning," Gabrielle said with a laugh. They stood together on the rise as darkness fell and the stars came out. 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most and built something beautiful together. Below them, lights began to glow in the windows of the ranch, warm and welcoming. Gabrielle could hear the distant sound of children laughing, probably her own getting into some kind of mischief before bed. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Quincy asked. "For believing me when no one else would. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For giving me a family and a home and a future. For everything." Quincy kissed the top of her head. "You never have to thank me for loving you, Gabrielle. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." They walked back to their house hand in hand, ready for whatever came next, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could face anything. The shame and pain of the past had been transformed into wisdom and compassion. The girl who had been cast out had become a woman who owned her own land, raised her own children, and lived life on her own terms. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Not revenge against those who had wronged her, but the building of a life so full and rich and joyful that the wrongs themselves became insignificant. Gabrielle Kellerman had learned that true strength lay not in avoiding hurt, but in refusing to let hurt define her. She had learned that shame belonged to those who inflicted harm, not to those who survived it. And she had learned that love, real love, was not about perfection, but about acceptance. Not about fixing someone, but about standing beside them as they fixed themselves. The years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of ranch life. Summers were hot and busy with cattle drives and horse breaking. Winters were cool and quiet, time for mending equipment and planning for the next season. Springs brought new calves and colts, and autumns brought the harvest of garden vegetables and the preparations for winter. Through it all, Gabrielle and Quincy remained partners in every sense of the word, working together to build their business and raise their family. By 1895, their eldest son Samuel was 16 and already showing promise as a horseman equal to his father. Rose was 14, beautiful and capable, already receiving attention from young men that made Quincy grumble protectively. The twins James and Henry were 12 and causing twice the trouble of any normal boy. And Grace, at 8, was the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by everyone, though she remained remarkably unspoiled in temperament. Thomas's children were also growing, and the ranch rang with the sounds of the extended family. Sunday dinners were loud, chaotic affairs with 14 people crowded around the big table, passing dishes and talking over each other and laughing at shared jokes. These were Gabrielle's favorite times when she could look around and see the family she had built, the legacy that had nothing to do with shame or pain and everything to do with love and perseverance. Mike Peterson, who had never married, became like an uncle to all the children. He taught them to rope and ride, to track animals and read the weather. He was a quiet man, but his steady presence was a gift to the entire family. In the spring of 1896, Gabrielle received a letter that made her sit down hard in her kitchen chair. It was from Martha Henderson, the woman whose son had attacked her so many years ago. Martha wrote that she was dying of cancer and wanted to see Gabrielle one last time before she passed. She had something she needed to say. Gabrielle showed the letter to Quincy that evening. "I do not know if I should go," she said. "Part of me feels like I should just let it be. That was all so long ago." "What does your heart tell you?" Quincy asked. Gabrielle thought about it. "My heart says that closure is important even if it is painful. I think I should go." "Then I will come with you," Quincy said immediately. "You do not have to," Gabrielle protested. "I know," Quincy said, "but I want to. You should not have to face ghosts alone." They traveled to Oro Blanco the next day, leaving the children in the capable hands of Thomas and Mike. The town had grown since Gabrielle had last seen it, new buildings springing up along the main street, but much remained the same. The general store no longer owned by Thomas, but by a family from back east, the church where her parents were buried, the boarding house where Mrs. Henderson had once ruled. Martha Henderson was in a bed at the boarding house, waited on by a niece who had come from California. She looked tiny beneath the quilts, her once solid frame wasted away by disease, but her eyes were still sharp, and they fixed on Gabrielle with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. Mrs. Kellerman, she said, her voice weak but clear. Thank you for coming. I was not sure you would. Your letter said it was important, Gabrielle said, sitting in the chair beside the bed. Quincy stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. It is, Martha said. She paused to catch her breath. I wrote to you once before, years ago, to apologize for what my son did and for my part in casting you out. But I need to tell you something else before I die. I need to tell you that you changed this town. Gabrielle blinked in surprise. What do you mean? After the truth came out about Jack, people started questioning things, Martha said. They started wondering how many other times they had been quick to judge, quick to condemn, especially women who had been hurt. The church started a fund to help women in difficult situations. The sheriff started actually investigating claims of assault instead of just dismissing them. It is not perfect, not by a long shot, but it is better. And it is because of you, because of what happened to you and how you survived it. Gabrielle felt tears prick her eyes. I never knew, she said. How could you? Martha said. You never came back, but I wanted you to know before I died that your pain was not meaningless. It brought change. It brought a little more justice to this world. And I wanted to thank you for forgiving me, even though I did not deserve it. That act of grace changed me too. I spent my last years trying to be a better person, trying to make up for the harm I caused. I do not know if it was enough, but I tried. It was enough, Gabrielle said softly, taking the dying woman's hand. We are all just trying to do better, to be better. You did that. You can rest easy. Martha Henderson died 3 days later, and Gabrielle attended the funeral. She stood in the cemetery where her parents were buried and felt the last piece of the past finally settle into place. She had been hurt, yes, but she had not been destroyed. She had been cast out, but she had found a better home. She had been shamed, but she had learned that shame was not hers to carry. As they rode back to the Double K, Quincy said, Are you all right? I am, Gabrielle said, and she meant it. I am more than all right. I am at peace. Good, Quincy said. Because we have a ranch to run and children to raise and a life to live. The past is done. It is time to focus on the future. The future proved to be bright. Samuel, their eldest, eventually took over most of the horse training operation, developing a reputation that brought buyers from as far away as California and Texas. Rose married a young rancher from a neighboring spread, and they built their own successful operation. The twins eventually went into business together, starting a freight company that serviced ranches throughout the territory. And Grace, the baby, surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a small school on the ranch for children from the surrounding area. Thomas lived to see his grandchildren born, finally passing away peacefully in 1903 at the age of 62, reconciled fully with his sister and at peace with himself. At his funeral, Gabrielle spoke about forgiveness and second chances, about the importance of admitting wrongs and making amends. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had made terrible mistakes but spent the rest of his life trying to correct them. Quincy and Gabrielle grew old together on the Double K, weathering storms, both literal and figurative, celebrating successes and supporting each other through losses. They became the heart of not just their family, but the entire community, known for their fairness, their generosity, and the obvious love they had for each other. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. There were more than 20 people crowded into the house that Quincy and Gabrielle had built, representing 3 generations of the family. As Gabrielle looked around at all the faces, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. That night, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Quincy and Gabrielle sat on the porch of their house, rocking in chairs they had bought years ago. The night was cool and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. 54 years old, Gabrielle said, marveling. Where did the time go? Into living, Quincy said. Into building this. He gestured at the ranch spread out before them, at the house full of sleeping grandchildren, at the land they had worked and loved for 3 decades. Do you have any regrets? Gabrielle asked. Quincy thought about it. I regret that you had to suffer what you did, he said finally. I wish I could have spared you that pain. But I do not regret anything that came after. Every day with you has been a gift." "Even the hard days?" Gabrielle teased. "Especially the hard days," Quincy said seriously, "because those are the days that taught us what we are made of. Those are the days that showed us we could survive anything as long as we were together." Gabrielle reached over and took his hand, weathered and scarred from decades of ranch work, but still strong, still capable. "I love you, Quincy Kellerman," she said. "I have loved you from that first day when you told me that shame is not in being hurt. You gave me back my life, and I have never regretted a single moment of sharing it with you." "The feeling is entirely mutual, Mrs. Kellerman," Quincy said, bringing her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. They sat together in the darkness, two people who had found each other when they needed it most and built a legacy of love and family and hard work. The girl who had been cast out was now a matriarch, respected and cherished. The cowboy who had stopped to help a stranger was now a successful rancher with children and grandchildren who adored him. And if sometimes in the quiet moments Gabrielle thought about that day in 1878 when her brother had thrown her out and she had walked into the desert with nothing, she no longer felt pain or shame. Instead, she felt pride. Pride in the woman she had become. Pride in the life she had built. Pride in the family she had raised. She had turned the worst day of her life into the beginning of the best thing that had ever happened to her. That was her true victory. Not revenge, not vindication, but transformation. She had taken shame and turned it into strength. She had taken pain and turned it into purpose. She had taken loss and turned it into love. And in doing so, she had proven that being hurt does not define a person. How they choose to heal does. As the years continued to roll by, the Double K Ranch became legendary in the territory, known for its fine cattle and exceptional horses, but even more for being a place built on love and second chances. Gabrielle and Quincy's children brought their own children to visit, and the house rang with laughter and stories. The family gathered for holidays and birthdays, for christenings and weddings, creating memories that would be passed down for generations. Mike Peterson eventually retired from active ranch work, but stayed on the property in a small cottage Quincy built for him. He spent his days whittling toys for the grandchildren and telling them stories about the old days. He never married, but was considered family by everyone on the ranch. In 1915, Quincy and Gabrielle celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary. By then, they had 14 grandchildren and were eagerly awaiting the birth of their first great-grandchild. Gabrielle was 60 years old, her hair gray, but her eyes still bright. Quincy was 62, his face deeply lined, but his smile still capable of making her heart skip a beat. "We have had a good life," Quincy said one evening, as they sat together watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for decades. "The best life," Gabrielle agreed. "Better than I ever could have imagined back when I was walking into the desert with nothing but a carpet bag." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not stopped that day?" Quincy asked. "No," Gabrielle said immediately, "because you did stop. That is who you are, Quincy. You see someone in need, and you help. That is what you did for me, and it is what you have done for countless others over the years. It is one of the many reasons I love you." Quincy pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence watching as the sky turned from blue to orange to pink to purple. The land stretched out before them, the ranch they had built together, the home they had created, the legacy they would leave behind. "I want you to promise me something," Quincy said suddenly. "What?" Gabrielle asked, a flutter of worry in her chest. "If I go first, I want you to promise me that you will keep living," Quincy said. "Really living, not just existing. Keep cooking. Keep spending time with the grandchildren. Keep finding joy in every day. Promise me you will not give up." "Only if you promise me the same thing," Gabrielle said. "If I go first, you have to keep going. Our family needs you." "I promise," Quincy said. They sealed it with a kiss, tender and sweet despite their years together. Neither of them knew what the future held, how many years or days or hours they had left. but they knew that whatever came, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together. As it turned out, they had many more years together. They lived to see their great-grandchildren grow, to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary in 1929, surrounded by more than 50 family members representing 4 generations. They watched the world change around them, the Old West giving way to a new era of automobiles and electricity and telephones, but some things remained constant: the land, the work, the family, and most importantly, the love between two people who had found each other when they needed it most. Quincy Kellerman died peacefully in his sleep in 1932 at the age of 79, with Gabrielle holding his hand. His last words to her were, "Thank you for the most beautiful life." He was buried on a hill overlooking the Double K in a spot he had chosen years earlier because the view reminded him of the place where he had proposed. Gabrielle mourned him deeply but kept her promise. She continued to live, to find joy, to be present for her family. She told her grandchildren and great-grandchildren stories about Quincy, about the early days of the ranch, about the importance of kindness and second chances and believing that people are more than their worst moments. She lived another 8 years, dying in 1940 at the age of 85, surrounded by family in the house she and Quincy had built. Her last words were, "I see him. He is waiting for me." She was buried beside Quincy on the hill, and their shared headstone read, "Together in life, together in death, forever in love." The Double K Ranch continued to thrive under the management of their descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the legacy of Gabrielle and Quincy. And in the quiet moments, when the wind blew across the Arizona desert and the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, it was easy to imagine two spirits standing on the hill, watching over the land they had loved and the family they had built, forever together, forever free from the shame and pain of the past. Their story became legend in the family, passed down from generation to generation as a reminder that the worst thing that ever happens to you does not have to define you. That being hurt is not shameful. That love and kindness can heal even the deepest wounds. That second chances matter. That forgiveness, both of others and of yourself, is powerful. And that sometimes the best thing that ever happens to you can grow from the seeds of the worst. Gabrielle Bradford Kellerman had been cast out for shaming the family, but she had built a family that would never know shame, only love. A cowboy had told her that shame is not in being hurt, and she had carried that truth with her every day of her life, transforming it from words into a lived reality. In the end, that was her greatest legacy. Not the ranch, not the business success, but the proof that resilience and love can overcome anything, that the human spirit is stronger than any trauma, and that happy endings are possible even after the darkest beginnings.